That's Brazilian.
My mother sent me this quote on WhatsApp. It said like this. I didn't agree with it, and now I love it. You won't always be motivated, but you'll forever be distracted by birds. You won't always be motivated, so you have to learn to be disciplined. And I read it, I was like, what do you mean? But the ideal is to always be motivated. But the quote is definitely right. Our forefather Abraham's life as a mortal human has come to an end, and his legacy is perpetuated by his son Isaac, Yitzchak. Abraham spent his life traveling around, greeting and meeting people, teaching them about God, and conveying the message of God's underlying unity in all of creation. Whereas his son Yitzchak seems to stay put, and when he moves, it's to dig wells. That sounds just about as random as the backdrop here. That's what we learn about him in this week's Parsha. From the Torah's description of Yitzchak, it really doesn't seem like he's doing much at all to perpetuate his father's legacy. But, of course, this was not so, and Yitzchak was very effectively carrying on his father's legacy. The Torah, unlike the late Parsha show, is not the slightest bit random. And Yitzchak, our forefather, digging wells, teaches us an extremely valuable lesson. As we've mentioned in the late Parsha show of, I think 2 weeks ago, Avraham represented and epitomized loving kindness. That was his mode of divine service, while his son Yitzchak represented restraint. And these modes really mean a lot more than these two English words, loving kindness and restraint. While his father Avraham, representing loving kindness, worked in that mode and was extremely successful going out and inspiring the masses, Isaac, whose mode was one of restraint, or can also be translated as discipline, knew that the reason for Avraham's success was also its greatest threat. Yitzchak, representing the attribute of discipline, understood that inspiration can only go so far and only last so long. I thought that was a cow for a second. Lawnmower, not a cow. What's the difference between placing water in a hole in the ground and digging a well? Well, a basic difference is that when you put water in a hole in the ground, it's probably going to dry out pretty soon. But when you find a well, you've uncovered a source of water. Abraham was an inspiration on tour, bringing the life-giving waters of godliness to anywhere and everywhere, and he was wildly successful. But motivation and inspiration, it's good, it's great, but it can dry up. While Avram went out and gave motivation and inspiration, Yitzchak stayed in his place, and people came to him. Our forefather Yitzchak teaches us that we must know how to dig a well. Don't dig a hole and end up in China, but dig within yourself and pull out the inspiration that's there. And the truth is, sometimes there won't be inspiration there. Even a well can dry up. Dig another well. You see, Yitzchak didn't teach us this lesson by only digging one well. Yitzchak dug a bunch of wells. And in fact, on some of them, people fought over them with him. And he encountered many difficulties digging these wells. So, what now? I'm trying to be inspired. I'm not inspired, so I'm disciplined enough to try to get inspired, and I'm just having issues. This is how God makes our life. And I feel like if we love life, we'll enjoy the struggle. We will enjoy the struggle of life, the evil impulse, the good impulse, the Yaakov, the Esav, the not being inspired, the being disciplined enough to get inspired, being inspired to be disciplined enough to get inspired, and if you're not inspired enough to be disciplined enough to get inspired, then be disciplined enough to get inspired to be disciplined enough to... With our increased love for our fellow Jew, our increased Torah study, and those two things automatically increase our joy. With our increased joy, we will dance and see Mashiach.